Hello and welcome. I'm Sarah Foster from the Cebu Training Committee and an economy reporter at Bankrate. On behalf of Cebu, welcome to today's webinar on covering consumer spending and retail in 2023. We have a great moderator and panel here for us today. Our moderator today is Maria Halkias, a retail reporter with the Dallas Morning News. And joining us as panelists are Shefali Kapadia, managing editor at the Financial Times, Jordyn Holman, business reporter at the New York Times, Thomas Lee, business enterprise reporter at the Boston Globe, and Dr. Michael Zdenek, U.S. economics director at S&P Global Market Intelligence. To our listeners, if you have a question for the panel, please drop it in the Zoom chat, and also feel free to use hashtag Cebu on Twitter. And with that, I'll hand things over to Maria.
Hi, thank you, Sarah. Hello, everyone. So this is supposed to be the Super Bowl for retail writers. I'm not so sure about that, but it is the most hyped time of the year when retailers are trying to get shoppers' attention in a real amplified way. It's true that everyone is shopping. If they have friends and family, they need to buy gifts, or they're attending parties or hosting parties. So that all takes planning and costs money. So yes, people are spending more this time of year and thinking about purchases more than the rest of the year. So we're supposed to try to capture what's happening, nationally and in the regions we each cover. We have some top retail and consumer reporters on the panel today. And Michael, who is our economist today. We need expert economists, this time of year to drill down in some of the consumer indicators. Quickly, I'll just say before we turn over to the panelists that, I always say that any story is a Christmas story. Whatever you are curious about is a Christmas story. If you want to know about a particular category of merchandise, or if a store, if that you're wondering about how it's doing, is it, what's the history behind it, or your malls, of course, telling people what's opened and closed in the past year in your little markets like mine. It's a slice of America, but they're all a little bit different. And just think of covering the holiday that way. It's what you're interested, other people are probably interested in too. So with that, let's get started. And we're going to first hear from Jordyn. And I know, Jordyn, you have a bigger universe that you're writing about. So yeah, let's hear from you.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Jordyn Holman. I'm a retail reporter at the New York Times. And this is my fifth Black Friday on the retail beat. So it's interesting. It's like for any retail reporter, it's like, it's Black Friday. But the way that I like to think about it is like, it is the perfect time to, like Maria was saying, capture people's attention with retail stories. And sometimes you can do sneaky retail stories that aren't necessarily Black Friday stories. So this is how I think about it. Black Friday has definitely changed over the past decade in terms of its importance. But if you ask any retailer, they'll still say there's a peak. It's just like, it's not a mountain, it's more of a hill. So that kind of eliminates the question, like if you're trying to get out of writing about Black Friday, you probably can't. It's still important. So I think step one there. The other really good thing to think about, or the way to frame it, is that every year I feel like there's the question asked, like, will Americans spend on Christmas this year? And like, that's not actually the right question. It's very much like, how much will they spend? Because just Americans, we're huge consumers. We really value gifting, or it's just kind of innate in us that we will spend during this time. So I think it's a perfect time to like just chip away at stories that talk about culture, that talk about like our values, that talk about certain brands that really show up and we gravitate towards during the fourth quarter. And it doesn't necessarily have to, you talk about their Christmas marketing strategy. Maybe you can dig a little deeper into like why that brand, always comes up around the Christmas, dinner table, or that when you want to go to the mall, that's like the image that you have in mind. So I think those are some things to think about just heading into the season. The other exciting thing about this holiday shopping season, compared to past years, is every year that I've covered Black Friday or the holiday season, there seems like there's a theme. Like when I first started in 2019, it was funny. The theme then was like, this industry is being disrupted. And then the pandemic happened. And so like that actually seems very quaint. But then like 2020 was the year of like everyone shopping at home, or you're not having the doorbusters because that wasn't a safe thing. 2021 was about the supply chain and order early, and everyone's freaking out about that. And then 2022 is the beginning of the Fed hikes and the interest rates. I think now it's like every thread of that is kind of coming together, and it's very unclear what the impact will be on people, or probably more accurate to say it's very tiered. People are living in different realities based off of financial incomes and states, and that's such a great opportunity, and no matter what market you're in, to chip away at that. Like Maria had mentioned before, like I'm covering broad national trends, but I'm also like reminding myself that while I'm talking to the national retailers, let me make sure, like for every retailer I'm talking to, let me make sure I'm talking to a consumer across different income strata, because those two might not align in terms of how they think the holiday season will play out. So those are the things that I kind of keep top of mind headed into these next few weeks. It is a fun, exciting time. It's nice because you don't really have to sell the importance of your retail story to your editors, hopefully not to readers, because they're inherently interested. It's just also a great time to like use the conversations that you're naturally having with friends and family and bringing that into your reporting.
Great. Good advice. I like that. Talk to one consumer for every retailer. That's a nice ratio there. I like that. Okay. So now we're going to hear from Shefali. Take it away.
Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a good afternoon. Happy to be here. My name's Shefali Kapadia. I am the managing editor of a Financial Times publication called CPG Specialist. And so we are focused on the food and beverage manufacturing sector. So think about all the snacks and candy and various impulse buys that you make when you're going through the grocery store. So thinking about kind of the holiday season and how that relates to retail, typically you think about food in the context of a grocery store. But of course, that has become so much more than just the traditional grocery store that you go to. So a lot of people are shopping in places like Walmart to pick up their food and beverage along with their apparel, their electronics, and all of the other items that they might need. Thinking about things like Club, for example, Costco and BJ's, and how people are kind of incorporating their day-to-day purchases along with buying their groceries at the same time. So while food and beverage obviously is not the entire scope of retail, there's a ton of different retailers that are selling those. And one of the things that we've been observing kind of in the data is seeing this shift as consumers think more about value and how do I get the best bang for my buck, is they're going and buying big packs of stuff at Costco versus picking up one smaller pack from a grocery store or a convenience store. So really honing in on that value and making sure that they make their dollar go as far as it can possibly go. So those are kind of some of the things that we're looking at coming into the holiday season. Of course, people buy food and beverages year round, maybe too frequently sometimes, speaking for myself. But one of the things that really comes into play during the holiday season is this idea of gifting. And I know Jordyn mentioned that too. So gifting can go across all kinds of different verticals, categories, retail, but with, food and beverage, confection is a huge part of that. So are you buying someone a nice box of chocolate for Christmas, or what kind of treats or perhaps limited edition flavors? We're kind of coming out of the pumpkin spice time of year and going into that more eggnog, gingerbread time of year. So looking at these different patterns of what consumers are buying, how they're spending their dollars. And also just looking at those macroeconomic factors of what's happening with inflation, which I'm sure is going to be a big topic on this panel today. But how much money can be put toward things like services, travel, entertainment versus how much is being spent on things that are more like needs, like your daily or weekly grocery shop. And even within that, how much are you buying, filling meals versus snacks and candies to kind of treat yourself to something. So those are all kind of aspects of food and beverage that we look at year round, but especially coming into this holiday season and with all of the various economic things that are happening, just taking into account those and how they're affecting consumer spending, which in turn, of course, affects the food and beverage manufacturers and how they're doing in terms of their sales and what kind of patterns that they're seeing.
Okay, great. Thank you. And now we're going to move on to Thomas for his remarks. Thomas?
So thanks for having me. I'm Thomas Lee, business enterprise reporter for the Boston Globe, and I'm the resident grump on this panel. Poor Maria has heard me say this before, but I'll do it again because I think it's worth listening to. So be careful with your Black Friday stories because your editors will try to make your Black Friday stories something like predictive of what's going to happen during the holiday shopping season. No one knows what's going to happen during the holiday shopping season. The temptation is to call a few analysts who happen to be available and you talk to a handful of people waiting in line at stores, and it doesn't really tell you much if you look at it from a predictive point of view. First of all, Black Friday is practically meaningless in terms of a unique sort of holiday because everyone's started their Black Friday sales already as we speak right now, and so also there's a misnomer thing that the term Black and Black Friday as the retailers get back to the Black meaning they become profitable. Black Friday is a big hole in retailers' pockets. Okay, I mean usually the idea was that you lure people in with doorbusters and prices, and then they would buy other stuff. And I think evidence has shown that they tend to just buy the doorbusters and leave. They just pick, what the most heavily discounted items are. And there's also this myth that people buy for other people, but I think that people tend to buy it for themselves when they go to Black Friday, and then they just go home. So if you want to cover Black Friday, I think you have to be more creative. I think you have to be more sophisticated. I think Jordyn said she covers it from a cultural point of view. I think that's how you have to look at it, and don't fall in the trap of thinking it's some sort of predictive sort of item. Now, in terms of the holiday shopping season going forward, I'll say a few things. One, the prevailing storyline is that inflation, right? So the idea is that inflation is going to cause people to not spend as much. Well, I say be careful with that because I think it depends on the category. Because the economy has been remarkably resilient. Yes, there is inflation, but there's still low unemployment and wage increases. So people, I think, are willing to buy stuff if they think it's worth it. Don't just paint a broad brush that consumers are not going to buy things. I think it depends on the category. So I'll give you a quick example. It was very fortuitous today. I don't know if you ever heard of a company called Shark Ninja. They make the vacuum cleaners and juice makers and ice cream makers, and they're based here in Massachusetts. And I just visited them today, their CEO, and they had a great third quarter, and they're probably gonna have a great fourth quarter. Their sales were up I might be making this up, but they're up double digits, 20%. And and they don't do a lot of discounting. So I think there is room for a company or companies that make stuff that is innovative and that is of exceptional value and that consumers are willing to pay for. So I think that look for those storylines. I like to do stories that are counterintuitive. I hate doing the same stuff that everyone else does, and I think that's a challenge for retail reporters, kind of going through the holiday shopping season, especially with the whole Black Friday angle on it. So let's see what else I noticed. Also, I would say that let's focus on supply chain issues. So during the pandemic, there was definitely a disruption of supply chain problems, inventory problems, but that stretched beyond just 1 year. That stretched on to a couple of years. So I have a source telling me that this is the first year where they really feel like retailers and manufacturers have gotten the inventory right as much as they think they can get it right. So we'll see whether or not their ability to match supply with demand. I think that's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out after the holiday shopping season concludes. So yeah, that's my rant. I think I hate Black Friday because I've been. I think Jordyn, you said it was your fifth one. Are you kidding me? I've done like 15 of them, and I'm so tired of them drag my butt out in the morning and having to go till like 4 a.m. in front of a Best Buy. So I get fanatical people like screaming for their $200 laptops. It's like, it's the one time in a year that actually I feel morally superior to every other person in this country. So, yeah, so that's just my rant for the day. So I look forward to the discussion. So.
Hey, that's a good rant. I know we all have our Black Friday frustrations, but we'll come back. I'm going to come back to all of you with some questions, but let's first hear from Dr. Michael. So,
that was fantastic. I didn't bring a soapbox to stand up. There is a lot I can say on that. Let me explain a bit who I am, what I do, and then I'm happy to answer any questions anyone on the panel has or from any of our viewers. I'm an economist at S&P. I'm responsible for our forecast of the U.S. consumer, consumer markets, finances, credit, household debt, and retail sales in particular. But I'm also a member of our U.S. macro team. And as part of that team, I build the models and I work with a team of economists to produce the analysis that underlines and really connects our award-winning forecast of the U.S. economy broadly, to the household and consumer sectors. And, for as far as business journals goes, I'm always excited to talk to you, hear about the stories that you're writing, and I love reading them because I like learning about the broader experiences of individuals in our economy, because I don't get the opportunity to do that a lot in my job. I forecast, consumption broadly or at a retail channel level. I don't often get to talk about, how the experiences of individuals may differ, and I think that's a lot of color that really helps connect economic reporting to the individual. But for our clients, the forecasts I produce are for retail sales and for PCE, consumer spending broadly, but also holiday sales. I'm happy to talk about any of those, and I'm also happy to talk about broader trends in the economy, what our expectations are for inflation or interest rates or consumer spending next year. But what I enjoy talking to journalists most about, and the kind of questions that I think are the most value added that economists or analysts can provide to you guys, is not just what happened and why it happened, but is this normal? I think our normal meter has gotten really broken the last couple of years, not just because of the pandemic, but also because of the global financial crisis. And words like recession and things that occur naturally are suddenly like scary monsters that live under the bed. And everyone tends to overreact when they hear the word recession these days. When another one will come, and it won't be the end of the world. Let us all hope. But so is this normal? And then again, this data point that I'm seeing that I'm interested in doesn't matter for the economy broadly, or is it just an isolated experience for a specific subset of consumers? Maria, I think you're still on mute. I'm sorry.
Oops, sorry about that. Okay. I was going to stick with you for a minute. So how should we talk about inflation in terms of the holiday season? How important will it be to how people are spending, or will it be?
Yeah, it can be very important. Inflation, our experiences with it affect, not only how people feel about the economy, but the actual dollars they have home. And, I've heard from the panelists that, employment has remained strong this year. And that really is where I would start my reporting this year. And that's very different than where we expect it to be at this point in the business cycle, And so we just got done with data from the third quarter where growth was remarkable. September's retail sales, bookends the third quarter, I think, where, at an annual rate, sales grew around 7%. That is like red hot. So it's not going to be unexpected that, next quarter, we're going to fall down from those heights a little bit. We've seen this uneven pattern throughout the year, but what we need to ask ourselves is when that reversion to the mean does occur, is it actually a sign that, consumer spending is slowing, or is it just normalizing? And I think that's a big important part. And so, So inflation affects, the wages people bring home, how much money they have available to spend, but also the mix of goods that they're spending on. Are they buying superior or inferior products, or are they looking longer and harder for deals? That's something that we've seen in the data in recent years a lot that may change this year, because the good news I can bring to the call, just to start off with, to talk about our forecast, is sales are going to be down this year compared to last year. And that's, now that I have your attention as to why that's good news, a lot of that is because retail inflation has slowed dramatically. So the current dollar spending will be lower than we've seen in previous years, but people will actually, in terms of real dollars, when we adjust for inflation, take home more goods.
Okay. And I'm going to jump around a little bit on topic because I want to ask everybody different things, obviously. So I'm going to go back to Jordyn. And Jordyn, I know you recently talked about, you recently wrote a story about Goodwill and trying to figure out its e-commerce business. But the whole thrift thing by itself in total has become, your generation and has really made that a thing, and it's an okay thing. So the whole idea of giving gifts and thrift shopping, I don't know, what did you discover? What do you want to say about that? Do you think there's a good story there for people to do on a local level?
I think so. Yeah. Like, there's not like the taboo around thrifting. I feel like, not necessarily my friends groups, but people around my age, when you say like a compliment about a dress, like, oh, I got this, I thrifted this. So that's good indication that the taboo is kind of gone. I would say, like, with the growth of e-commerce thrifting specifically over the past few years, it then begs the question of why wouldn't that show up in holiday shopping? Why wouldn't people turn to like the Poshmarks of the world, the ThredUps of the world, to do that kind of thrifting? But then I don't quite have an answer to this, but you always kind of want to think like, okay, but what else? Like, what makes that even more significant this year? Is the fourth quarter equivalent, like as important to these companies as it is to Macy's, or does it flip on its head? One thing that came out in the reporting with Goodwill was this idea, like one of their challenges as they build e-commerce is that they get their inventory off cycle. So you're turning in your shorts in November, and that's like an awkward time to buy or gift someone shorts, at least in New York City. I know you're in Dallas, so maybe it's not that awkward. So I think you like want to really be specific about like a company's financials during this time, but it also like maybe, fourth quarter isn't that important, but a company might be trying to make it more important to capture the spend that everyone's doing right now. So there's a lot of like, I would just challenge people to ask the next question beyond that. So it's a little bit more interesting and not something that you could write any time of the year. So that's how my mind works when you ask that question.
Okay. Shefali, we talked a little bit about supply chain and what's happening with that, but you were in the thick of it for that whole pandemic period as an editor, specifically. So yeah, what do you think? Do you think the supply chain, we can not worry too much about writing about that this time around? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so just a little bit of background. Before I came to the Financial Times, I was the lead editor of Supply Chain Dive for about 4 years, as well as Transport Dive. So kind of, yeah, exactly like you said, Maria, kind of in the thick of it with in 2018, we thought the big thing was e-commerce is exploding and this is so dynamic. And then the pandemic happened and, rest is history kind of situation. So I think there's definitely been a little bit of recovery in a lot of the supply chains. So we're not having the same degree necessarily of issues with a lot of delayed shipments, or things just not being made on the manufacturer side and getting to the retail store on time. So looking at things like out of stocks, for example, are something that a lot of companies will talk about when they report quarterly earnings. Another metric is service levels. So kind of the percent of goods that are actually making it on time and to a retailer in the amount that it should. So typically, retailers will want to see that service level in the 90s, at least as far as it goes for food and beverage manufacturers. And a lot of the pandemic, kind of 2020, 21, those levels were in the 70s. So like 70% of shipments were actually making it on time and in full. So definitely a pretty dramatic shift that we've seen. One thing that is kind of coming up a little bit more is not necessarily on the manufacturer to retail end of the supply chain, but more so the commodity side of things. So, where are oil prices? Sugar prices is one that is spiking. Coffee prices, just because of various kind of environmental situations, have been kind of on the rise. So that end of the supply chain, I think, is worth looking at, probably not so much for a holiday perspective. Maybe next holiday season that might start to impact some of those prices, and therefore how consumers spend on things like chocolate or other kind of sweet treats. But a lot of the supply chain issues have started to kind of normalize, and we're not seeing the same degree of delays that we saw maybe 2-3 years ago.
Good. So there's ammo for your editor who wants you to do a supply chain story. You've got the ammo for how to answer that. Before I leave you, Shefali, since you are very familiar with the whole grocery scene, there's one, we skip over Thanksgiving, but there is a food holiday that people, spend a lot of money on. And it's just, to me, it's the weirdest thing that we're all eating the same thing in America on one day. But are there any stories that Thanksgiving grocery stories that we should be looking out for?
Yeah, I think a lot of it does come back to inflation. And I agree with Thomas, what he was saying earlier on about just being cautious about trying to be too predictive about how people will react to inflation. I mean, maybe it means they're not going out and buying a car and a house right now, but it doesn't mean that they're not going to buy their favorite brand of turkey and whatever other side dishes are kind of traditional, because those things are, in the grand scheme of things, even if they're inflated, they're still going to be cheaper than, going on a vacation or buying a car or some big purchase. And there's a real pull with things that are traditional and family driven, and people want that sort of comfort of, oh, for 20 years we've done it this way, so we want to keep doing it that way. So one of the things we're seeing is a lot of the grocery retailers offering these promotional deals. So Walmart is one, Aldi is one, Kroger. And they just have this sort of bundle of, hey, you can get an entire Thanksgiving meal that feeds 4 for X number of dollars. And they're really doing specific promotions. A lot of them are for their own, what we refer to as private labels, so the store brands. So if you go to the store and instead of buying the brand name condensed soup, you get the store brand condensed soup. So I think there's definitely a story to be told about just how does the consumer spending shift perhaps for Thanksgiving, or how does it not, in terms of, are you still going for example, your butterball turkey, or are you getting the store brand turkey because it's a little bit cheaper? And are you bundling these things together as a promotion? Or are you eating out because maybe you happen to, be in that kind of fortunate category where that made more sense and you've been cooped up for the last couple of years. So yeah, I think there is, as it relates to inflation and spending, a story to be told about Thanksgiving and grocery and how that consumer spending is changing.
Okay, great. So Thomas, I know you've worked in several markets in different US cities, so you have this perspective of covering Black Friday and holiday season in very different markets. I just talk a little bit about that. Do you think there are regional differences, or is everybody kind of the same this time of year?
You know, I think I should say that they're different, but I don't think they are actually.
Mhm.
I mean, I might be totally wrong in that. I think they pretty much follow along with the trends. I mean, you would have to think like, what is it about a particular region that might make it different? You know, is it cultural? Is it economic? I mean, I think those are the things that you have to think about. So I'm totally making this up, but if you're gonna say maybe
Mhm.
the Midwest are more frugal, you know, I think there's
Yeah.
that whole Scandinavian vibe going, perhaps. You know, I don't know. I haven't, you know, honestly, I don't approach it regionally. I just actually don't think that's particularly interesting. I tend to I like to look at the broad scheme of things because I think it gives you more options to do stories. So.
Yeah, yeah. I just wondered if over the years, if you'd seen any differences when you were, you know,
I think I can honestly say
the
that
enthusiasm was different and
I
different.
hate Black Friday equally in every single
Okay,
that
that's
that I covered. So
good, good, good. Um, okay, and you recently did a mall story, and this little nostalgic, and that is something that is permissible this time of year, I think, to bring in some nostalgia because it's a one, you know, if it is that kind of holiday season, but the malls, you know, I don't know, we there's still some very strong malls. They're not all dead, and maybe looking at your local mall. What did you find? What did you think it was a good
oh yeah, so
exercise?
the story that you were referring to, I did a and I credit the Globe for doing it because it was kind of like a first person reported out, but as essay. I'm a Gen Xer,
Mhm.
and I remember in the 80s. You know, I'm from Watertown, Massachusetts, and we had two malls in the town. Back then, that was the only reason why you would ever go to Watertown because we had two malls across the street from each other. And as a Gen Xer, it was a very special cultural thing for us to hang out in the malls. So I kind of wrote a piece that now that malls have struggled, that sort of connection between teens and malls have kind of dissipated. So, but you're right. I mean, it depends on the mall. Again, I don't want to a caution against saying all malls are struggling, but there's something to be said about what you were talking about, nostalgia. How much is nostalgia really kind of fueling this whole idea of Black Friday, right? I mean, why do people still do it? You know, I mean, you can just stay at home in your pajamas and order it on on your phone, right? So here's an interesting story idea, and I probably shouldn't give it away, but I just thought of it as I were talking. The idea of retail theft and inventory loss has been huge. In fact, Target has and many others have made a big issue out of it. And frankly, I think that's I'm not saying that isn't a problem, but I think it's a bit of a smokescreen because Target's actually not really doing that well this year. So you notice how they don't bring up retail theft when times are going great. You know, it's like, hey,
Yeah.
we have 10% same store sales gains, but we lost all this inventory. So here's an idea that I just might do before you guys beat me to it, perhaps. But I think it's going to be worth saying that let's not forget about that. Retailers have made inventory loss and theft an issue this year. That
Yeah.
does not go away in the fourth quarter. In fact, I think it matters even more because we're counting on nostalgia for people to actually visit stores. So as you know, they've been like putting stuff behind like lock cases, even ordinary things like toothpaste and shampoo and whatnot, right? So but this is a time of year where you want people to come to your store. So how are you going to manage that? I'm kind of interested to see what kind of inventory losses do retailers take during the fourth quarter because you want people to go visit your stores. You want people to have access to the merchandise. So I think that's really going to be something interesting to see as this plays out. So
Yeah, I think you're right. We don't know because it's quite different. So I think we're getting to the point where we are going to, let me say one thing about in defense of Black Friday and why people go to the mall and stuff. I will say this, over the years, I've interviewed lots of groups of like mothers, daughters, sisters, friends, that kind of thing. And they say, I ask, oh, why the heck are you out? Why aren't you, like you say, in the pajamas sitting at home shopping? And they say, they're off of work, they're together, they're coming in from out of town. This is one chance. They know each other's children's sizes, that what they like, they hate, So it's a time to actually be efficient in their shopping. So there's a little bit of that going on too, I think. But anyway, all right, we're going to open up questions from the group listening here today, joining us. There's was one question about wanting to know what everyone there we go. I'm set. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay, Dom DeFuria, a former colleague of mine. Hello, Dom. He's curious about hearing which data sets the panelists prefer to watch around this time of year, whether public or private data sets. Who wants to raise their hand?
I can grab it. I'm sure we all have different things. I often am looking at Placer AI. They do foot traffic data, so that's helpful. Sensormatic Solutions, I believe they are. They also do foot traffic data. Honestly, it's very much like pick your own adventure, but like know the methodology of what they're doing. I think that's really key to call out, because the time frame of things, if you can call out specific, like this is for only stores that are department stores or whatnot, like that's very important to tell readers. And then Adobe Analytics, they do a good data set to show what like e-commerce sales looks like.
Mm-hmm. And
I would also throw in and take it with a grain of salt, of course, the International Council of Shopping Centers, use your National Retail Federation stuff could be useful at times. But I actually agree with Jordyn on the Placer AI. That's actually really good. I really appreciate that. So
yeah, I've used them too. Shefali, do you have?
Yeah, I'll add a couple that are obviously a little bit more specific to the grocery store side of things. But Circana is an organization that tracks spending in a lot of different CPG and food and beverage related channels. So that's a great resource. They do various reports, webinars, and I've had decent luck in getting, if I have a special request for them to put that together for a journalist. And then the other one I would mention is NIQ. They used to be called Nielsen IQ, now they're NIQ, but similar data collection on various categories of food and, how the dollar sales are changing, how the unit sales are changing. So those are kind of two really good ones, especially if you want to drill down into any kind of specific category.
Michael, do you know of any of the in real time data series that we might be looking at this time of year?
What's most important when thinking about real-time data, and I completely understand the demand for it, the market need for it. One of the expertise I bring to the U.S. group is how to include this type of data in our forecasts. But I would reiterate what was said earlier on the call, and then about extrapolating from this high frequency data, these short-term trends, because it can be very noisy. And the same with a lot of the data sources that were named here. Be very careful about the methodology and make sure that methodology is presented well to your readers, because often the samples that they're using are not reflective of the nation as a whole. And while it can color our analysis and inform it for how certain regions or sectors of the economy are performing, if you're going to say that Black Friday sales are going to be down because of foot traffic data or online sales, and then the official numbers come out, the BEA numbers, which is like something that our group specializes in forecasting and figuring out how all the different components add up to those numbers, they can often be very incongruent.
So when do we really know? The first week of January? When do we know all this?
We get a pretty good idea. So two trends we've seen shifting a lot in recent years is that adage that people start shopping in October. The pandemic and this kind of like fear of like the stockouts that we had 2 years ago really kind of did seem to cement that shift, that a lot of spending is done in October and November, which means by early December we have a pretty good idea of what happened. And then we've gotten this interesting blip in December, which was one of the things I'm watching this year, and to see if e-commerce sales in December have fallen unexpectedly in the last couple of years. And that could be partly because a lot of people are experiencing what I've experienced personally, which is, I can't get the goods that I'm ordering last minute. So I have to go to the store and buy them. But the other side of that, and we start thinking about what this means for companies and what this means for consumers heading into next year, is because of that dip in September, we've seen this rebound in January the last couple of years, and in this year in particular, that this surge in spending we saw in January, and I get a lot of questions like, is this people redeeming gift cards? And yes, that's part of it, but it doesn't completely explain this large jump in spending that maybe it's just people buying things that their friends didn't get for them. But that really sets us on a path for growth this year that we've maintained. So when we have that large surge, just like we just had in September, even if retail sales falls a little bit this week, which we're expecting a small amount of payback, it doesn't necessarily mean that growth is going to be lower for the year. It's just it's lower relative to where it was last month.
Okay. There's another question from our group. Let's see. I know you said all that there's hesitancy to shop for bigger purchases, like travel. Do we see this continuing? Let's see. So people have been spending a lot on travel, right? Everybody I know went to Europe this summer. Everybody. But
I think I think travel normalized this year, and as far as big ticket items, that's been one of the sectors of strength. We've seen good spending and durable good spending being remarkably robust this year. People keep talking about how inflation and higher financing costs are going to really eat into auto sales and things like that, and that has absolutely not happened at all. So, if you look at headwinds going into next year, the effect of the UAW strike on rebuilding inventories, because people do seem to like, having cars on the lot and being able to shop for them, returning inventories to a level that's normal, and, this rising trend in sales continuing, and how long that continues until it starts to peter out, we're going to continue to see durable goods spending and good spending in general trend upward, because those are large ticket items and they're expensive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This isn't a large ticket item, so I'm a little off point here, but I think a category that's worth looking at is beauty. I think beauty has been remarkably resilient over this year, and I'm not a fortune teller, but I expect it to have a pretty sizable impact in the fourth quarter. Think of places like Ulta Beauty, which has been kind of a saving grace for places like Target. So they have like the store within the store at Target, and then the company that I mentioned to you that I just talked to, the CEO, Shark Ninja, they had they just entered the beauty category with some sort of hair device. I forgot what it was, but then they said they started selling into retailers that they previously hadn't, such as Sephora and whatnot. So I think that's something worth looking at if you want to kind of examine what category has the potential to really do well this fourth quarter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And another great time to talk about the culture again, like why do we still buy beauty, like when we're not buying other stuff? And also, to Thomas's earlier part, beauty also struggles with a lot of retail theft, just because of small items and whatnot. So let's combine all these ideas.
Yeah.
And like it's definitely seen a better year than clothing has, and that's an easy comparison. Clothing and apparel, maybe it's people are wearing sweatpants, but putting on their best faces for Zoom would be a fun story to write. But there is a price story there as well too. As we look at that category of retail, it's one of the fewer prices have risen this year. So that increase in dollar sales volume is not, that increase in sales is actually dollars, not necessarily volume. So
another thing I will mention too, that apparel as a category is a complete mess. It's always been a mess. it will continue to be a mess, and retailers eat a lot of margin. But how about this for a story idea? I mean, I think we've done stories that return policies have been tightened up over these past a few months of this year. Amazon cracking down on things like that. Will that change, or in the fourth quarter when people are? I mean, that's probably the biggest return period, I'm guessing, right? So, I mean, I think that's worth looking at, whether or not that those tight return policies are going to impact, what happens during the holiday shopping season.
And people care more about that this time of year. They care about shipping rates, deadlines for shipping, return policies.
It all depends on what they focus on, right? If it's just sheer growth and sales, they'll do anything for sales. But if they're focusing on margin, and so that's what you got to think about when you think about holiday shopping season, right? Normally, it's a kind of a FOMO event, fear of missing out on like market share. So people just keep cutting prices, like I get market share. But that may sound great in terms of their revenue, but you got to look at the margin. Like, what did they spend to get those sales, right? So it depends on what they're focused on. And if they're focused on a margin, I'm willing to bet that they'll crack down more on things like returns, because returns is very expensive for them. So.
Yeah.
The other thing on that is a lot of companies offer free shipping, all of that kind of stuff to gain a customer that like maybe one time sweeten the pot. But what you have been hearing a lot more this year is targeted advertising and targeted sales to protect the margin. And I'm shocked we haven't said the word AI yet here, but okay, but like those tools are really helping retailers right now, like push Maria very specific sale based off of how she usually shops versus Thomas, and so I think that's another thing that you can look at. And I think that also comes from talking to shoppers, like what's been in your inbox, what do you care about in terms of certain incentives.
Yeah, when you were talking about makeup and cosmetics, the whole TikTok thing and watching people put on their makeup, the influencers, I don't know how that whole scene is going to be important, but that's another thing. But back to AI, we do have a question about that people want to know if we're receiving a ton of PR pitches about AI, and what makes them stand out. I think what you hit on it, Jordyn, how they're going to communicate with us. Are the emails still important? And, how are they using it that way? Right?
Yes. To answer the question, my inbox is full of AI pitches and has been before. This year, because it's this year, but like specific to Hollywood or holiday, it was before Halloween. I would say what sticks out is I think I'm really interested in like how it all works, because we do know, like we spent a year learning about OpenAI and that kind of stuff, but like how is there anything tangible about like XYZ retailers using this to help search become easier, or to like solve actual problem in the world that people have around gifting? Like I think that stands out. It can also be tough, at least how I cover retail. It can be tough if it's just very like theoretical, but is there a retailer that you can point to that is working on this that readers would know about that company? Like that's the pitches that stick out. I'm sure other people on the panel have other perspectives, but that's mine.
So far I've only seen like Walmart has talked about giving tools to a lot of thousands of their employees so that they can use AI to condense long reports and save time that way that they need to know about, so that's not really helping the consumer experience maybe, but
I would want to know how like chatbots are impacting especially the idea of social commerce. Retailers for years have been talking about how do we turn all that traffic on Twitter, now known as X. I can't get over that, by the way. Facebook, all that, like they get the traffic, they use it for educational purposes, marketing, but they've never been able to crack people buying stuff on social media. And I'm kind of curious if AI will change any of that, especially with the use of chatbots. I don't know, something to watch. So
yeah.
Or are there any generational differences?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think one of the things when we talk about these things like AI and sustainability is they can be really lofty. And I think that's what a lot of the pitches that I receive or my reporters receive are, hey, we set this goal or we have this, like, it's just so zoomed out, so big picture that it makes it hard to make that into a story that feels relatable to an audience, whether that's a consumer or another business person. So I think it's always about like taking it and making it feel actually actionable. Or if there's a case study, like a specific manufacturer, retailer that used AI and they specifically did this. They didn't just use AI, but they did, this specific thing with this specific tool, and they were able to get X result. I think those are the stories that are interesting for people because it just puts it into a much more practical lens. And I think for a lot of us, like grasping the concept of, methane emissions, it's just such a broad thing. And how do you talk about it in a way that isn't just like lots of abbreviations and scientific words. But if you can talk about, an example in my world is like Ben and Jerry's and how they're actually looking at, cows and how they produce methane and how they're like taking that out to then translate into lower emissions for ice cream. Like that's a story that people can get behind versus we set a target for 2050, which like I'm barely thinking about tomorrow, let alone 2050.
Yeah.
So just bringing it back to reality, I think, for a lot of those stories.
Maybe the consumer will be using AI to figure out what they should buy for these 10 people on their list. Maybe it'll be a flip thing from that.
I would love to see stories about and for journalists to push back on companies who are making these lofty promises with artificial intelligence about like how are you using this to benefit in the customer that's not an ad.
I agree with you because I think we got pitches from companies that claim that they use AI, but when you follow up on it, they're saying, "Oh, we plan to use AI," or it's all like they're not doing anything with it, right? They're jumping on the buzzword,
You don't need AI to target ads. We've already filled up our inboxes, like we've said. So how is this going to improve the buying experience for the customer? How is this going to provide for them a improved buying experience that might get them to become more loyal to the store in general, instead of just offering me the perfect dress shirt because that ad is so targeted to my exact color of plaid that I like.
Wow, it's emotional. Obviously, it got us going there.
Yeah, that really animated us.
It did.
You combine what's in my inbox versus AI. That was perfect.
Yeah, but I really want to use it to fill my list, but we'll see.
I want to use AI to filter out all the crappy PR pitches I get.
Okay, there you go. That's it. We have another question. If we have found any legitimate sources of data on small business Saturday spending and spending overall at small businesses, all the data I've ever seen just shows spending estimates as a whole for the day that doesn't break out small businesses. Well,
the one thing I can think of, as I actually usually don't do small business Saturdays, but I think American Express does something.
They do.
They put out a lot. So I mean, that's one idea. So.
I would second that. I've seen it from the credit card companies. I'm happy to look for the data if they want to follow up with an email if they're looking for something official.
I think also MasterCard, I feel like doesn't break out into small businesses.
It's just that day. So if there's a spike that day, is it because once again people are off work and have this big chore to do and they're shopping on that Saturday, or is it because it's Small Business Saturday? I don't know. Maybe it's an anecdotal story.
Yeah, I was like, that is a perfect door to open and like call small businesses. Do you see a boost? Is this marketing around Small Business Saturday actually filtering down to you? Because I would love to read that story.
I'm skeptical of those days that are like, oh, this is Small Business Saturday. And like, don't forget what's on Monday, Cyber Monday. Cyber Monday, every day is cyber. I mean, it's just so pointless. Like these kind of trying to narrow these trends that are happening all time into a single day,
But
So,
originally it had a reason. It was that none of us had broadband at home, and we get back at work after finding out everybody's sizes and what toys they like and want or whatever, and we would shop at work on the great internet that was there. So I know that's kind of like that's the origination of Cyber Monday. Uh, but
um,
you're
just
right, now it's like any other day.
just to respond to Tori's the Amex thing. I think they really do put out a small business thing, Amex on Saturdays that are just about small business. I think they actually do that. So I'm just looking at no, okay, they're pretty short.
Okay. It's just what sales were that Saturday, huh? Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, it's an anecdotal story then. We all have, small businesses in our markets that depend on Christmas too. And especially, with there's that's and that's something people care about. A lot of people do want to shop at small local companies. So it's not nothing, even though
Well,
we
I
don't
would
have the
say
data.
that kind of to think about it this way, Black Friday, I would say, is important to small businesses too. Just like Black Friday would be important to e-commerce players. So that's
Yeah.
what I'm saying. Like the danger of kind of like isolating these events. I mean, I think I like to see stories like that. Like we always tend to say Black Friday, people going to stores, but it's just as important to any other type of retailer, whether you're large or small, or you're online or brick and mortar. So, but because out of habit, we keep thinking it's just about people going to the physical store on Black Friday.
Yeah. We have time for some closing remarks from everybody. Um, and who wants to go first? I can if you want, or
I'll go
you
first.
guys
I'll
go.
just say, just be creative with your stories. Don't do what everyone else has done, or follow what everyone else has done. For God's sakes, there is no story with gift cards. I think we milked that cow try a long time ago. Okay, don't do the story about what do you do with the amount left over on gift cards at the end. God, it's been done before too. And please don't do. Let's follow a family as they get up at 4 a.m. in the morning. And every editor says that same story as if that was the first time that anyone's ever thought of that. Okay, so I think I'm good at telling you what not to do. But I guess what I'm saying is be smart with data. I mean, sourcing and methodology, but also thinking, what is this predictive value to it? If you're gonna posit it as predicting something, okay, be wary of that. Perhaps cover about Black Friday as a kind of a cultural event, as opposed to some sort of business predictive event.
Okay.
And just remember that it's really, really like retailers don't really make a lot of money. It's really this competitive sort of discounting. They want sales and market share or whatnot, but it can be very unprofitable. I'd say watch not just sales numbers, but the profitability of this stuff. So how much did it cost them to get that? So that's my kind of closing remarks. So
Okay. Who's next?
I can go.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say yes, if you must do a Black Friday story, remember that like holiday spending is happening for 4 weeks after that. So remember that like the data will probably be better afterwards. People will still have an appetite. So don't just feel like you have to cram everything into your story next week. Because I think it's always this funny dynamic that happens where editors will be like, what happened Black Friday? What happened December 26th? There's literally a month in between. So just think creatively, like Thomas said, and that you actually have a lot of time to like tease out these stories.
Shefali?
I would say one thing is to be really careful in scrutinizing data when it comes to year-over-year comparisons. So something last November might have been huge, and then this November it's down 1%, but that doesn't mean it's bad or the economy is failing or we're all like not spending on anything. So just be really cautious looking at how we're comparing this year to last year. And it might even be beneficial to look at, for example, this year compared to 2019,
Okay.
a quote more normal year, just to get a better sense of, how much is something up or down, and is it really falling or rising, or is this just kind of a 1-year anomaly?
Okay, Michael.
Yeah, I'll piggyback
Closing?
on that. Exactly. I think that hits the nail on the head. Be careful about percentages versus level changes in the data, and also revisions to the data. No one ever talks about the revisions to the data that often really affect the path of spending overall for the year. And I think that that's a really important view of the data that's often lacking. Other technical things you can look at, are broad trends in wages and unemployment. Are there sustained rises in either, or is it just a single monthly blip? Is inflation in retail different than inflation broadly? Yes. Does it matter? Yes. How consumer spending, changed. It's the end of the year is an arbitrary distinction. So the data tells us where consumer spending has been. It doesn't always tell us where it's going. So where do we think it's going based on the state of the economy now, and looking back as to what it was when the data was summarizes that activity. And then holiday sales in general. And then I think there were so many great stories on here. I'm really excited to read about them.
Okay, great. And we're out of time, so I'll just repeat my, every story is a Christmas story. What are you curious about? Do that. Don't worry, like the others said. And it's third quarter earnings time. It's worth a listen to this, those reports, those earnings transcripts and reports that are from companies that are important in your market. Pay attention to those. You can, pull out some quotes that will make your stories better. And shoppers get it that you need their opinions this time of year. So don't be afraid to talk to them. They get it. Okay. Wonderful panel. Thank you. Happy holidays.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.